Hey everybody, ABC 10 meteorologist Brenden Mincheff here. It's the weekend, so of course we're going to talk about the drought, but we're also going to give a storm forecast update because we have a lot more rain on the way with some potentially dangerous flooding conditions as well. But of course, when we talk about rain and flooding and all the snow that we've had, does that mean the drought is over? Well, stay tuned. We're going to find out the answer to that question. Taking a look at radar through Sunday morning. The storm forecast is first, so let's talk about that first. Radar through Sunday morning. Right now, we do have some heavy stuff down in the San Joaquin Valley, but scattered showers all across northern California. That's going to continue pretty much all day long today. So as we work through your Sunday here, you can see the thunderstorms, especially in the afternoon. That's our best chance for that, about 80% chance of thunderstorms through the afternoon. It's going to be spotty, kind of pop-up showers and thunderstorms, very similar to what we had on Saturday morning. But for your Sunday, it is going to be a little bit more widespread. So as we take a look at Futurecast through the late morning hours, you'll see that those showers and thunderstorms, for the most part, are in the foothills. But once we get into the afternoon hours, around 3:30, now we start to see some stuff popping up more frequently in the valley. Some of these could be some severe storms as well, capable of small hail, heavy downpours, frequent lightning, and also funnel clouds and/or tornadoes. So something we're watching very closely today. Late Sunday evening into the overnight hours, we're going to see a little bit of a break, but then more rain building in around midnight. That'll move through the valley. Some of that could be heavy rain as well, maybe a rumble of thunder or two. A little bit of a break yet again around that morning commute for Monday with just some scattered showers out there. And Monday generally should be more spotty, more scattered than what we've seen both Saturday and we'll see on Sunday. But still, that potential for a few thunderstorms does remain through Monday. And then once we get to Monday night, you see a lot more rain building in, especially over the coast. That is the next atmospheric river storm that's going to bring us some problems. We'll talk more about that in just a second. But first, for Sunday, March 12th, level 1 marginal severe risk for the Central Valley. And that is predominantly because of a 2% tornado risk. So what that means is there's a 2% probability of a tornado within 25 miles of a point in this green shaded area. This all comes from the National Forecasting Center in Oklahoma. A 2% tornado risk, if you're in Oklahoma or Texas or some other Great Plains state, doesn't sound all that impressive. But here in California, that 2% risk is notable, similar to what we had yesterday for Saturday, where we did see that tornado-warned storm in the San Joaquin Valley. So something, again, that we'll be keeping a close eye on today. We're also watching, however, for excessive rainfall. And this is for Sunday. You see the level 1 risk for much of the San Joaquin Valley and foothills in the southern Sierra, but then a level 2 risk, that slight risk for the Sacramento Valley in for the far northern part of California. But that also continues into Monday. So we introduce that level 3 moderate risk on Monday. This is mainly Monday night when we start to see the atmospheric river push in. And then also on Tuesday, we're still looking at that excessive rainfall risk, that moderate risk even, for the foothills of the Sierra, because we're going to be seeing a lot of rain with this incoming storm. So here is that next atmospheric river storm as it pushes its way in towards California for Monday night and then all day Tuesday. You could also call this a pineapple express, as it perhaps more traditionally has been called. The more scientific term is atmospheric river, because it is essentially a river of moisture in the sky. But if you want to call it Pineapple Express, same difference, means the same thing. Taking a look at the model data for this incoming warm atmospheric river storm for the foothills, you can see there is good agreement that it'll be right around that 500 IVT magnitude. And that, again, is with the European model, and the American model, the GFS model, both relatively similar in strength. This would come in just a touch weaker than the previous storm we had at the end of last week, but only barely, and it's important to keep that in mind because when we look at these numbers, the forecast numbers, it is a lot of rain. In the yellow area, 1.5 to 3 inches of additional rainfall, of new rainfall, I should say, by Wednesday night in the valley. 3 inches to 7 inches for the orange color in the Sierra foothills and up into the northern Sacramento Valley. That is a significant amount of rainfall. Notice the high snow levels as well. 24 to 48 inches of new snow is expected for areas like around the Tahoe area, around Donner, around Echo, where we would see a mainly snow event with this one. But then in the southern Sierra, 48 to 60 inches of new snow. Again, that is in the southern Sierra. It will be a mostly snow event, whereas in the valley and the foothills and even the Sierra up to about 6,000, 6,500 feet of snow or so, it will be a predominantly rain event. So another warm storm with a lot of moisture coming in that's going to fall instantly as rain. So it's going to be that instantaneous runoff as opposed to that snow that just kind of settles in and lingers. Not the case with this incoming storm. Mostly rain across Northern California. So because of that reason, we've got a flood watch until 10 a.m. on Wednesday. Again, that excessive runoff I was talking about from rain and then snow melt. Flooding of rivers, creeks, and streams is expected, as is some roadway flooding. And just remember, never drive through flooded roadways. The road closed signs are there for your safety. They're there for the safety of others. And even if you don't see flooding across the road, if there's a road closed sign, maybe the structural integrity of the road is compromised because maybe the ground underneath of it is saturated and could collapse out. So basically, what I'm saying is don't drive around road closed signs. Please, please, please. We see it all the time. Please don't. We're going to take a look at some rivers now. We're going to start with the Tuolumne River at Modesto, and you can see that flood stage is 55 feet. It's expected to crest Wednesday evening into Thursday at about 56.9 feet. It's currently at 52.3. You can see it'll go down a little bit, but as we get all that runoff from the new storm that's coming in, again, it is expected to crest above flood stage. Now we're looking at the Merced River at Stevenson, and you can see this one expected to crest into the record high territory. The record high 73.81 feet, expected to crest at 74.2 feet. Right now it's in the monitor stage, but look at how much runoff we are expecting. This is obviously further south, and this is where the bulk of that moisture looks to come in. The storm looks to come in the right along that central coast into the southern San Joaquin Valley. That's where we're seeing a lot of that moisture. That's why we're going to see so much at the Merced River at Stevenson. Again, the record high 73.81 feet expected to crest as of this video at 74.2 feet. So take any evacuation warnings and orders very seriously. Don't wait until the water's at your house. It might be too late to leave at that point. Those extra roads might already be flooded out. The Sacramento River at I Street, a little bit further north, not expected to reach the flood stage right now. 29.7 feet is where it's expected to crest. It is in the monitor stage, getting close to 30 feet, but this is just something, again, that we're going to monitor. That's why it's in that monitor stage. We'll obviously keep an eye on it as the storm makes its way through. The Cosumnes River at Michigan Bar, however, this one expected to go back into flood stage. 13.7 feet is the crest there. Flood stage is at 12 feet. The Cosumnes River at McConnell, a little further downstream, right now at 39.3 feet, also expected to go up into that flood stage by Wednesday into Thursday, cresting at 43.5 feet. Again, that's in flood stage. So if you live near the Cosumnes at McConnell, make sure you're paying close attention to the forecast and listening for any official evacuation orders or warnings. The McKellamne River at Benson's Ferry, right now in the monitor stage, 12.8 feet. This is right near I-5, cresting at 18.4 feet in the flood stage. So I can't stress this enough. Another warm storm with all the rain that we've already seen. Rivers are already running high. As you can see, a lot of these have already been in the monitor stage, and we're going to add more to it as we go through the middle and end of this coming week. So it's important, I'll say it again, if you live near a river, it's really important that you are paying attention to official evacuation notices, warnings, and orders to leave. And please leave if you are told to do so by local officials. It is super, super important. That water is going to rise, and it's going to rise quickly as well as we get towards Wednesday and Thursday. Winter storm warning also in effect now from 5 p.m. to Wednesday. Heavy snow is expected. Again, this is going to be a relatively high elevation snow event yet again, above 6,000, 6,500 feet, and at times even above 7,000 feet. So another relatively high snow level event, but when we do see that snow, it's going to be heavy snow. We're going to see another 1 to 3 feet above 6,000 feet, and then up to 6 feet possible once you get above 8,000 feet in elevation. So chains are absolutely going to be required at times along 80, along 50, and along all mountain passes. And then also we could see some road closures because areas like Donner Summit, Echo Summit, expected to see all snow from this, right? We might get a little bit of rain early on in that storm, but for the most part, this is going to be an all snow event for the highest peaks and passes along 80 and 50. Carson Pass included in that, going to be an all snow event up there. So as we look the next 10 days, thunderstorms in the valley, especially Sunday. Maybe we see some on Monday as well, but it will be a lot more isolated, a lot more scattered. We'll be at about 64 degrees on Monday. Then that next system arrives late Monday into Tuesday. Tuesday is going to be a soaker. It's going to be a wet day, total washout for any outdoor activities. 60 degrees on Wednesday, Thursday, a little bit of a drying trend. And then we see the potential for another storm start to move in on Friday for St. Patrick's Day. And as we work towards next weekend, we see more rain and snow arriving, including for the first day of spring, which at this point is only about 9 days away. Next Monday, 58 degrees. That's that first day of spring. Let's go ahead and move into now the drought portion of this video. So talking a little bit more long term about what we've seen for the season. This month, for the month of March to this point, we've seen 1.86 inches of rain. The average to date, 1.17 inches. So our departure from normal is about 3/4 of an inch. That's good news. This is at downtown Sacramento. For the water year, which started October 1st, we've seen 22.63 inches so far. Average to date, 14.87. We're way above that. That's up above by 7 3/4 of an inch. That's a downtown Sacramento. When we compare that to the previous water years over the last few years, we're doing very well. In fact, 2016 to 17, total for the water year, we did 33.94 inches. That is above the 30-year moving average of 18.95. When we look at the 2017-2018 water year, we were below that 30-year moving average. We were just above it in 2018-19 at 25.87 inches, but then we were much below that number in 2019-2020. Look at this, one of the top 10 driest years on record in downtown Sacramento. 7.74 inches of rain for the entire water year. That was 2020 to 2021, and then 21 to 22. That was last water year. We saw 17.10 inches of rain, also below the average. This year, we are back above that average. We've done better than we have the last 3 water years at 22.63 inches. Likely, in fact, to pass this number here from 2018-19 as well. We're really close to it with, again, another 1 to 3 inches of rain expected in the valley. We'll likely get very close to that, if not above it, by the time we get past this storm. Keep in mind, there's also 200-plus days left in this water year. Not going to rain, obviously, in July. Not going to rain every day in July or August or even likely September. But we'll add a little bit to that even in some of those dry summer months, and especially once we get towards September, we'll likely add maybe 1 storm to that, 1 little weak thunderstorm or 2. So, we'll keep adding those numbers up with still 200 days to go. So are we going to get to that 2016-17 with 33.94? I don't know. That seems a little far out there right now, but the way that the winter's been going, we've seen a lot of these atmospheric river storms. We've had a lot of rainy days, so who knows? Maybe we will end up getting to that number. But for now, at least we have done better than the last 3 years. This is important, and really these last 3 years really go to show just how dry things have been and why the drought has been so bad when the average is almost 19 inches of rain in a water year, and we've picked up in 2 years only about 10 inches or less. So big deal that we're finally above that number. That's good news. And again, we're going to continue to add to that. It's really not just Sacramento, though. A lot of the state is actually above where they normally are to this point in the water year, in some cases by a lot. Look at that. Los Angeles, 7 inches to the good so far on their water year. This is to date, 7.12 inches above. Bakersfield, 3 inches above. Fresno, 7.5 inches above. Stockton, 9 inches above. San Francisco, a perfect 10 inches above where they normally are. South Lake Tahoe, water equivalent, 15 inches above normal. Redding, Eureka, also 1 inch to 2 inches above where they normally are to this point in the water year. And obviously, saying it again, with more to come. So as we actually take a look now at the drought monitor, you're going to notice nice improvement through the Central Valley into the Southern Sierra. That is totally gone. There's no drought, not even abnormally dry. That abnormally dry category is like that recovering drought. Can also mean you're kind of entering that drought category, but you're not quite there yet. But in the case of much of the state of California, that abnormally dry category, 30% of the state is actually exiting drought. So that's good news. The moderate drought and the severe drought, still 24% and 19% of the state respectively. And most of that is actually in Northern California. That's for a few reasons. Groundwater is one of those. Reservoirs is another one. We have not seen as much rain to the north of California. Again, even though we're above average, remember I showed you that map of those water years and how dry we've been? We've been so dry that even the rain that we've seen has not totally filled Shasta. Average to date is 84% and capacity is 63%. So Shasta's still not even at average despite all the rain that we've seen. Trinity, much the same way. In fact, Trinity is hurting even worse than Shasta is, only about 1/3 of capacity. It's just really been a quirk of how the storms have hit California, is that they've really been from the Sacramento area to the south, including down to Southern California. But Northern California, where those biggest reservoirs are, just really haven't seen those storms make landfall there this year. So they're not quite as full. But the thing that Northern California has going for it is that later on in the year, so April and May, Northern California still has those better chances of seeing those atmospheric river events. Whereas once Southern California, really, once we get to that time, they're not seeing those. And even here in the Sacramento area, we really don't see a whole lot typically through April and May, whereas Northern California still has 1 or 2 more opportunities there in a typical year. But this year has been pretty much anything but typical so far. We'll see how it plays out. Oroville, 115% of average, 76% capacity. Even though they are letting some water out because of all the incoming rain, that number's still up from where it was last week. And then Folsom, 111% of average, 60% capacity. Lots of water coming into Folsom because of all the runoff that's coming downstream. That's why they're dumping so much. But I'll remind everybody that Folsom's primary charge is to protect Sacramento from flooding. It is not to store water like Shasta and Oroville is. It is a flood mitigation dam. It is there to protect the city, not provide water to it necessarily. As we talk about snowpack now, Northern Sierra average to date 158% of average and 165% of that April 1st average. Above average in both instances, but again, when you compare the Northern Sierra to the numbers further to the south, it's not as impressive. Remember how dry we've been. That's why even that 50% difference matters. Central Sierra, 202% of average to date, 213% of the April 1st average. So literally 2 years worth of snow sitting in the Central Sierra right now. Same story. It's about 2.5 years, honestly, down in the Southern Sierra. Average to date, 244%. That's 255% of the April 1st average. Just an insanely snowy year in the Central and Southern Sierras. But you can see how that is lagging. The Northern Sierra is lagging behind, especially when you compare it to the Southern Sierra. It all has to do with just the trajectory of the storms that have come in, and they've hit the Central Sierra, they've hit the Southern Sierra, but not the Northern Sierra. And one other thing I want to address is that a lot of people think climate change means warmer, drier, and it does in a lot of cases. However, the extremes become more extreme. So we're still going to have these extreme wet years, kind of like what we're having this year, right, with all that snowpack. But we're also going to have those really hot and dry years like what we've had most of the last 10 years, honestly. So this is a bell curve, and this is kind of showing you with our past climate, average is here. So when we talk about temperature, when we talk about precipitation, most of our days would fall right near average, right? Of course, we still have those cold days. We still have very few extreme cold days. We'd have some warm days, and we'd have a few extremely hot days as well. But when we shift our averages, it, again, makes the extremes more extreme. So what I mean by that, you'll see as we shift our average, that bell curve scoots a little closer to the warmer and the extreme heat now, because our average is right here in the middle of the bell curve, where all of our days, most of our days, fall. Now most of our days are warmer days, right? Now we have more instances of those extremely hot days, but we still have instances of colder, wetter days as well. So it just means the extremes are more extreme. Doesn't mean we totally eliminate snowy winters. Doesn't mean we totally eliminate wet winters in California. It just means we are becoming more likely to see warmer and drier winters in California. But there's also an important thermodynamics concept here, and that's that warmer air holds more moisture. A 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in air temperature means that air can hold about 4% more water vapor. So as we look at this handy chart here, you can see that could mean heavier snow, right? But it can also mean heavier rain, like what we're seeing this year. So even as the climate warms, you know, the Pacific has warmed by, average sea temperature as a whole has warmed by about 1 degree Fahrenheit over the last 50 years or so. So if you take that into account, that means the ocean air is able to hold about 4% more water vapor, right? Because we're seeing that evaporation, the air is warmer, the atmosphere is warmer, so we're holding more air, we're evaporating more water, all that moisture can stay in the air longer. So when we get these atmospheric river events, they can be heavier, they can dump more water than what we've seen in the past. We can have these more extreme days where we get these heavier snowfalls, we get these heavier rainfalls going on. When we talk about mega flood, remember, it was becoming more likely that we would see a mega flood scenario as the climate warms. That's because warmer air can hold more moisture. So the extremes become more extreme, the wets become more wet, the dries become more dries. But what does that mean for this year? Is California drought finally over as we're seeing the state lifting out of drought? Well, it's complicated. It has to do with long-term drought and short-term drought. But we asked a couple of experts, and here's what they had to say.
So I think we are out of drought according to a lot of indicators of drought, right? I think our reservoir levels are basically at sort of normal right now, and we have lots and lots of snow left to melt. And of course, we have the Pacific fire hose aimed at us. So I think it's safe to say that from a surface water supply, we have effectively ended this drought. You know, there's other aspects of drought that are a little bit more nuanced, getting into things like groundwater, and those things aren't cured by a single wet year or several wet years. That's sort of a long-term issue. But in terms of at least sort of this most recent drought, I would say that sort of, you know, parade of atmospheric rivers and then some of the continuation of wet conditions really has sort of, you know, put the nail in the coffin for that drought.
A drought is kind of a temporary scenario, and we're becoming hotter and drier for longer intervals, and that changes how you have to do planning for water management. A drought is like an extended period of time where it doesn't rain and you don't have any precipitation. But when you have a climate that is going through repeated cycles of drought, then what you're actually going through is aridification. And, Restore the Delta has been in business 16 going on 17 years. And we have had many more drought years than we have wet years. And that points to this idea of aridification. So really what we have to think about is that with climate change, our extremes are becoming just that, more extreme.
Aridification is when a climate becomes drier and drier, more desert-like. It's a trend that some say is happening here in California. Regardless, long-term drought cannot be solved by one rainy winter.
Yeah, this year will basically maybe provide a little bit of relief, but we've got a huge hole from the groundwater side to dig out of.
This idea that water is being wasted in the ocean is a myth. Natural geography on the West Coast is that rivers flow into the ocean, and when they flow in during these high water periods, it is what keeps commercial fisheries alive, the salmon fishery alive. It's what cleans out the system. If we don't ever get a chance to share in the water during the high water events for the benefit of the system, then we're stuck. We will always have degraded water quality, and we will lose our fisheries, and the toxic algae will just continue to sink into the Delta and become a permanent part of the estuary. We cannot manage water in California as we have for the last 40, 50 years with managing these boom and bust cycles. We have to recalibrate how we plan for water management with the understanding that we're going to go years with very little precipitation, and that when it comes all at once, we have to have a myriad of local projects to capture water to be used, I think, more at a sub-basin or regional level.
One type of water capture that Restore the Delta is wholeheartedly against is, perhaps unsurprisingly, the Delta Tunnel.
They have not done analysis of, we think, full and accurate analysis of saltwater intrusion coming from sea level rise during very wet periods, and how will the tunnel actually operate with its screening system when it is absolutely inundated, because during heavy flood events it brings down a lot of debris through the Sacramento River. And so we don't think those issues and concerns and questions have ever been properly addressed. At the same time, the project fails because when you go through these years and years of dry conditions, you are not going to be able to move enough water through the tunnel to make the bond payments that the water districts would have to make every year to repay for the tunnel. And we don't think it will function in the way they think it will during the very wet periods. We think the solution for California during these wet periods is to do wide-scale floodplain capture, so that we are doing significant groundwater restoration, protecting people from flooding, and getting water back into local streams, lakes, sloughs, and floodplains, and back underground, so that we have healthy aquifers that will get us through the dry periods.
I would say our hydroclimate is reliably unreliable. We just simply do not have normal water years.
After 3 consecutive La Niña winters, most of that pretty dry, La Niña has finally come to an end. But as we move into an ENSO-neutral pattern with El Niño on the horizon, are we moving into a wetter long-term pattern?
Hard to say right now whether or not El Niño will really develop, how strong it will be, and how that will influence, especially precipitation in California. I think we typically would generally expect sort of El Niño to increase sort of the odds of wetter winters, especially in the southern half of the state. It's sort of mixed around sort of Tahoe, plus or minus. That's a bit of a crapshoot there. Of course, we can hope for wet and then hope we don't get super wet, because there's an optimum, and we rarely seem to have optimal hydroclimate. We have too much or too little, rarely anything that is in the middle. I think we have a lot of water right now, right? We probably do not want to see a repeat of that conga line in March, right? Because that would be a warmer conga line, and it would do a number on the mid to high elevation snowpack, and that would cause some significant challenges for flooding and reservoir operations. But so from the fire season perspective, I think we should probably expect a little bit of a late start of fire season in the Sierra Nevada, just because that snowpack is going to melt out much later than normal this year. And of course, as snowpack melts out, it provides a supplemental water source, keeping fuels wetter than they would be otherwise. So I wouldn't anticipate a bit of a late start for any fire season, especially in timber. In the grassland environments, it's a bit of a coin toss, and it comes down a little bit to whether we get some spring showers or not, and then a lot of those end up being humid ignitions, and those are a little squirrely to predict exactly.